East Haddam is a small Connecticut town of just over 9,000. Since it was first settled over 300 years ago, it has become home to a rich history because of the people who call it home. One resident has a story that goes beyond the town, all the way over to Europe, during one of its darkest times, World War II. That resident is Sergeant Harold W. Bailey. Harold Bailey was born in Portland, Connecticut. One of the earliest memories he can recall is Charles Lindbergh's historic transatlantic flight. This event left a huge impression on Mr. Bailey, as that was when he knew that he wanted to fly. Mr. Bailey graduated high school in 1939, but there was not a job around, as America was still in its final years of the Depression. In addition to odd jobs, Mr. Bailey went to trade school for a year and worked as a carpenter in Middletown. 2 years later, news came of the attack on Pearl Harbor. After that day of infamy, President Franklin Roosevelt declared a state of war with the Axis powers, and Mr. Bailey registered for the draft on February 16, 1942. After being sworn into the United States Army that October, he went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts by train, and then traveled to South Carolina to complete basic training. Mr. Bailey was placed in the infantry, but still wanted to be in the Air Force, so he took the Army Air Corps exam. Mr. Bailey was sent to Tennessee, and then to San Antonio, Texas. He was placed in radio school, learning Morse code, but eventually transferred to the gunnery school in Las Vegas, Nevada.
They sent me to radio school, and I couldn't handle it. The Morse code. You had to come over earphones, and then you got to write it down. And I could not listen and write. I'm not made that way. And so they took me out of the radio school and I went to gunnery. And that was all right, I could do that. And so when the day they were making up crews, they offered me a job as an instructor in the gunnery school. And I said I didn't want that. I wanted to go on the crew. And so they said there was an opening for a tail gunner. And I said, I'll take that.
He then traveled to Florida and then to Georgia, where he was assigned his B-17 and joined the crew. After receiving B-17, number 4210699, there was trouble with one engine, which required a new part. Before crossing the Atlantic, they flew to Fort Dix, New Jersey to pick up that part. However, the part was not there. Neither was it in New Hampshire or Newfoundland. So they were required to cross the Atlantic with the bad engine, which gave out during the flight. On 3 engines, they flew through storms and reached Northern Ireland, ultimately arriving at Kimbolton Army Air Force Base in Huntington, only 7 miles off target. The date was May 25, 1944. On May 29th, Mr. Bailey's crew departed at 0600 for their longest mission yet. The target was a synthetic oil plant in occupied western Poland.
We got shot down at 1:30. I know that. And I think we took off at 6 o'clock. It was an awful long ways. And we were on oxygen most of the time. It's a long time to be in one position. I couldn't move much. I think we were lucky. Nobody got hurt except the bombardier broke his ankle. Most of the crews, somebody got hurt. Some of them pretty bad. None of us got hurt. The first shot that hit us took off the vertical fin. Of course, that was right over my head, and I didn't even know it. I was on oxygen. Apparently, my oxygen tube was cut, and I was out, and I came to again, and I aimed my guns at two different airplanes. The guns wouldn't fire, so I knew then that the electrical system was out, because the guns are fired by solenoids. I passed out again, I think. I'm not sure. But they decided to bomb at lower altitude. So when it got down below 14,000 feet, why then I didn't need the oxygen. And I knew what was going on then. But I was we don't have oxygen, just like half drunk. As far as I know, we hit the target. Of course, they told us we were going to bomb a synthetic oil plant. When we got there, we found out that the synthetic oil plant wasn't there. It was an assembly area for Focke-Wulf airplanes. And they were right there on the ground. And they were training pilots there. Boy, they shot us down. I was maybe 16 years old. I didn't meet him, but most of my crew did. The German pilots brought this boy in, said, "This is who shot you down." And they said he was about 16. And that's pretty young to be flying a combat aircraft.
B-17 number 4210699 went down about 4 miles east of Messeritz, Poland. Fortunately, every crew member survived the crash. Mr. Bailey was able to parachute out of the B-17 and landed safely on the ground, which would later earn him a membership into the Caterpillar Club, which is reserved for airmen who saved their lives using a parachute. Mr. Bailey was able to escape for 2 days, sleeping during the day and walking by night. But by the second day, he needed water, as there was no running water in that flat area of Poland. He eventually came to a house with a well behind it. When a young boy went to get water from the well, Mr. Bailey walked over and got water from him.
I looked, there was another woman that come out of the other side of that house. I knew damn well she was going for a posse pretty soon. There was about 30 men came down the road. Some had shotguns and some had pitchforks. So nothing I could do except give myself up. They said they'd never seen an American.
Mr. Bailey was then placed on a train and taken to the jail in Frankfurt-Oder. The next day, he was placed on a truck and taken to an area with crashed B-17s, as the Germans would use whatever they could from the crashed bombers.
Well, we learned the gunnery school, how to assemble and disassemble. And we could learn to pass. You had to do it blindfolded. So I knew what I was doing when around the 50 caliber guns. If you take it apart wrong, you could kill yourself with it. It's very dangerous. They didn't want their soldiers doing it, so they had me doing it. There's a spring in there, very powerful. And if you take the I'd say it was a back cover, but that's not the right name. If you take that off, you release that spring, and that spring would go right through a man. There's that much tension on it. Work on something like that, you gotta work in the right sequence.